Greetings viewers, Eric the Car Guy here. Thank you very much for tuning in today. In today's episode, I hope to entertain and educate you as I do in all of my videos. In particular, I'll be working on this 2003 Honda Pilot that's behind me. You might remember from previous episodes where I removed the entire cradle assembly with the engine and transmission and all that. In the previous episode, well, I worked on the front suspension and replaced the front struts and wheel bearings and did a bunch of stuff there. Now it's time to turn my attention to what's on that engine cradle and swap over the old transmission for the new, along with some new engine mounts and some other stuff. There's tons of, well, useful information in this video, especially about dealing with rusty fasteners. I've got quite a few of those for you, along with other struggles along the way to get this done. Anyway, I hope you find this information, well, useful and entertaining, as I mentioned. So let's get to the action already in progress. Take it away, Eric. Now that I have a majority of the things done on the body, it's time to turn my attention to what's happening here. I plan to disconnect all this stuff for the transmission, get the transmission ready to disconnect from the engine. Then I'm going to lift the engine and transmission off of this assembly. It's a warm day. It's actually early December. I'm going to try to take advantage of that and see if I can get the subframe painted. I'm going to start by tackling this myriad of electrical connections and things that are here. Also removing the starter and this radiator hose. Actually, I may remove this whole assembly because I plan to replace that thermostat, and getting all of this off of there might be helpful. It's not as bad as you think as far as getting this stuff off of here. It's really just disconnecting connectors. WD-40 is your friend. I also intend to repair this ground connection, which you can see is pretty well trashed. And you know, if you have a Honda of this vintage, probably not a bad idea to take a look at your ground connections, because you might remember this one completely broke off. So I imagine the repair of these grounds is going to do a lot to help out the electrical systems on this Pilot. This long tube coming up is actually the vent. Anytime you have moving parts inside an enclosed assembly, you need to vent it. Like I said, I'm just going to pull this whole thermostat assembly off of here. There is a 10 millimeter down here that has an important ground connection that needs to be disconnected. This little universal helps me get down in there and get the angle I need to get the thermostat off, or thermostat housing, I should say. I'm going to wait to pull the thermostat out of here until after I drain the block, which I intend to do after I get this whole assembly up off of here. That way I can drain it into something. As you can see, already a little bit of coolant came out. I'm going to take the opportunity to point something out really quick. If you run into this, it's really weird. And what I'm talking about is if you don't see this tube here, it's weird. These early transmissions, what Honda had us do, they had us install an update, which was this pipe here, which this is normally where you fill the transmission. Anyway, they changed the fill plug to put this opening at the top so that they could run some transmission fluid to help cool second gears right underneath here. They were having issues with the second gear burning up in these transmissions. This is one of the band-aids that they made us do at the dealership to try to address that. So if you don't have this tube, that would be weird. And if you don't, check your VIN, call up Honda, find out if it's due for that update, and take it in and have that update done. Well, somebody's already gone in here and replaced this transmission. They kind of broke a lot of the connectors, which I'm annoyed by, but it's not the end of the world. I usually take the dipsticks out, even though these normally go back with the core. And also, the new transmission won't come with these two lines coming out of here. We'll see how much of a mess they make. Now, normally these parts of the harness are attached to different places. I usually come in with my pliers and just sort of pinch these places and allow it to come out. These look like they were just pried out. Looks like our vent tube got a little damaged. I'm going to set this to the side. This is an important component. If it's not on the new one, what I'll do is I'll trim this down a little bit and just slide this down on there. I like that this has this little hook at the top to prevent any moisture from getting back down into it. Like I said, it's really not all that complicated. And as far as reconnecting everything, if you just lay the harness down, it's pretty much pointed at all the connectors where it's supposed to go anyway. At least that's the philosophy I go by. Now I'm going to remove the starter and get to all these fasteners for the transmission and just loosen them up. These are 17 millimeter that hold the starter on. And I'm doing all this now before I remove it off of this because it's stable. When it's hanging around up in the air on an engine hoist, it's not nearly as stable. The long bolt goes on the bottom. That's one seriously corroded ground. That blue converter is a telltale sign of a transmission that has been remanufactured. Now I'm going to go through and loosen these fasteners. I'm not going to disconnect them. There's another one down here, I believe, that I also might be able to get to somewhere. The other fastener is right here above the intermediate axle. I'm going to knock that one loose too. And come to think of it, I could probably just come in here and also take these 3 14mm fasteners for this intermediate axle off. It's got to come out anyway, and it's going to give me better access to that bolt. You might see that little piece there that helps locate the axle. So the top bolt is just a regular one. The 2 lower ones help locate it. At this point, there are only 2 engine mounts holding this onto the assembly. That one and this one over here. So if we remove this through bolt, which I intend to do, and this nut in the front, I will be able to lift this whole thing up off of here. Remember, there were 2 other mounts on this side that, as you can see, I've already redone, or already undone. There were 14mm fasteners that went up underneath through the subframe here. I'm just going to remove the nut for this front one. The engine hoist will be in the way. Gravity's keeping that right where it is. The last time I did this, when I did the Odyssey engine, I used a seat belt to attach to the transmission and also up here on the engine. The thing about it was I just put that on my engine hoist hook, and I couldn't adjust this in this direction or these directions in order to get it to settle onto the cradle nice. This has this screw up top which allows me to change the point where the engine hoist attached to spread the load across these 2 points. Only thing is this chain is not going to work out, but I have a solution for that. That solution is to not use the chains. Before I get started, because I can, I'm going to lock the wheels in place. Keep this thing from moving around. Hopefully I'll get enough height out of the engine hoist. I didn't consider that this was up high enough to where that might be an issue. Yep, my seat belts. Still going to use them, just in a different way. This is the hook that I'm using in the front, right behind the power steering pump. And then this is the one on the transmission that I'm using. Looks pretty good so far. This is really the only thing left holding this on, 17mm. This little weight is what seemed to fall out. We're free now. To me, it looks like it's lifting up at the back a little too much. Even with this out of the car, you gotta be mindful of what it's doing. Oh yeah, probably should undo that power steering pump. This whole setup is amazing, like amazing. Between the thing for the engine hoist and the cart, this is gravy. There are coolant drains on the side of the engine block here. There's also one in the front that is right here. I'm gonna undo both of those, try to drain as much of the stupid coolant out as I can. The one on the front here is a 19. There's a washer. It didn't come off with this, but it's still on the engine. But make sure it's there when you put this back together. Otherwise, you could create a coolant leak. One on this side is more of a bleeder valve that's 12mm. And when I say more of a bleeder valve, it looks like a bleeder valve. Now, why couldn't they put that on the front? You can see it's way less messy. You have to do both sides because they're both independent though. So both sides of the engine block need to be drained if you want to get all the coolant out. Next time, I'm gonna see what I can do to get that done before I get the engine all the way out. Seems to be drained out now. Because I want to get some painting done, I think the next step for me is going to be to remove this old engine mount, which I'm replacing. Anchor Industries hooked me up, actually with all the engine mounts, so that one's coming off also. Gonna remove the power steering rack from this assembly, the front control arms. Yeah, I think I'm gonna remove that guy, which is a damper. Also the stabilizer bar, that's gonna come off, and the remainder of the power steering. These are 12s. If memory serves, these were all 14s, and I loosened them while it was up in the air. Next, I'm going for the power steering rack. There's a bracket that holds it here. There are also 2 fasteners that hold it here. These are 17s. And then there's 10 millimeter here, this bracket. Okay, there's a 14 that should go through here that somehow didn't make it back in. I'll reinstall that. Apparently this one goes down through, and it's 14. Easiest power steering rack removal ever. And now for the stabilizer bar. I was afraid of that. Bolt biter sockets for the win. They really come in when in situations like that. Oh man, that is a suck fest right there. Broken frickin' bolt. Mainly because that goes into something blind. That means I have to drill it and retap it. Now this was never caught on video, but there are 2 broken fasteners already up in here that I was waiting until after I removed the power steering rack to deal with. These hold one of the hangers for the exhaust on, and both of them broke. But since part of it's still sticking up, I'll be able to heat this nut, just come in here with some vice grips and spin these out. Well, I hope that I can do that. One, but that was the hard one. This one is easier to get to. Famous last words, right? That's 2. Let's try something. It's either not going to work or it's going to work really well. I'm going to try to weld a nut to what remains here, and then I'm going to try to turn the nut, which hopefully is going to bring everything else with it. Hopefully when I do that welding, it's going to provide some heat that will go down into this and help release it. I cleaned off an area on the subframe for the ground so that I made sure that I had a good one. I'm going to use this castellated nut. I have plenty of these and they aren't as useful to me. I don't know if that's going to work or not. So far, no joy. Let's try that again, but I'm going to try cleaning the surface of this a little bit first. I think the key is getting penetration down into the bolt. I'm going to really crank the voltage up on the welder. Ooh, so close. I mean, so close. Awesome. Only 2 things left to remove on this subframe, and that is these lower control arms. Rather than buying these bushings in this ball joint, which both ball joints, you might remember these things are completely wasted. Rather than doing that, I have all new control arms with new bushings and new ball joints. Easy peasy. These are 19 millimeter. Yeah, you should be jealous of my cart. You should be very jealous. Add a little heat. We've already got it out. Heat is your friend. My friend, anyway. If you're not replacing the control arms and you're going to remove these, definitely think this through because the heat will damage the bushings. As I stated, I'm replacing these. So in my mind, I'm like, so what? But if you mean to keep those, beware that heat's gonna damage those bushings. That's a completely stripped down subframe. I'm gonna take it outside, soak it with some degreaser, and then, well, we'll pressure wash it. While I wait for that first coat to dry, I'm going to take care of a few other things. Stabilizer bar for one. Then we've got new bushings, so we can lose these guys. I'm going to see if it comes loose on its own first. And it did. Nice. Can we make that happen twice? I don't know. Sweet. Finally, something saves me some time, geez. In case anyone wondered if these were worn out, if you see orange dust, it's pretty much over, but it should be more like this, where it takes some effort to move it around. That joint's still good. That one, definitely not. I think we can flip it now. I can work on the power steering rack and get that all sorted, cleaned, while this is setting up. Also sandblast some other components that I hope to paint. I don't know if I mentioned this, but I've been using Eastwood's Extreme Chassis Black. Since I took this rack out, I've been a little bit concerned about what might be a leak here, but I'm not going to address it right now and replace the rack. It's kind of expensive. But if I do need to replace the rack at some point, I want to knock this fastener loose. This is difficult to get to while it's in the vehicle, but if I get to it now, it'll save me time down the road. Otherwise, I'm going to go through and clean everything up that I can. I'm also going to replace the outer tie rod ends. Yep, you guessed it, penetrating oil. I believe this guy's a 14 millimeter. I'm using, as you probably noticed, a line wrench. Always when you're breaking something like this loose, that's kind of what you want to use. Yeah, this is sticky. It's not like a lubricant, whatever this is coming out of here. I think there was something like down in here to prevent anything from getting down in there that's come out with the pressure washing and everything else. I'm actually going to wait and re-tighten this after it's in the vehicle because I want to make sure that all these lines and everything are in place where they're supposed to be, and then I'll tighten this down. That way stuff is not all under strain. Should have broke these loose before I took it off the vehicle. If I was a thinking man. I mean, I am sitting right on top of a vise. Perfect. Want to try to keep it in the same place, even though I know the alignment's going to be completely trashed. If I don't take care of this now, when they go to do the alignment and this nut doesn't move, they got to heat it. Whenever you heat metal parts like this, they expand, which means it's going to mess up the alignment until this cools back down. So make sure that everything moves nice before it goes to the alignment rack. Otherwise, it's going to cost them time, which ultimately costs you money. The part number for the tie rod end, they're both the same. They don't come with a cotter pin or a new castellated nut. Actually, I don't even think this nut is castellated. I think you just put a cotter pin on the stud. I suppose I could also put anti-seize on these threads before putting it back together. The fact that it moves, I don't really think that's necessary, but it can't hurt. This actually feels fairly new. Maybe that's why it moved. I took those rusty brackets and other parts, sandblasted them and cleaned them up so that I could paint them. The goal was never to get these 100%. Nobody's ever gonna see them. The idea was to get a paintable surface, which I believe I have. Yeah, I think we're good. First, I'm gonna hit these with some prep spray, and then I'm gonna paint them. This has a distinct smell, and I've been trying to place it. I'm like, this smells familiar. You know what it smells like? Urinal cakes. Yep, this stuff smells like urinal cakes. So it's spray urinal cake. While that paint dries, I would love to swap transmissions. I'm gonna have to do a couple of things first though. I wanna remove this bracket because it's not gonna come with the new transmission. Also, even though I'm replacing these mounts underneath here, I need to remove them so that I can get the fasteners for them. These fasteners go in this way. These fasteners here go up in this way. I believe they're all 14 millimeter. I will also need to remove this guy up front because, as you can see, it's attached to the transmission there. I believe I also mentioned this bracket. It's a 17 millimeter. This is to hold the O2 sensor wire as it comes down. You really want to keep this because behind it is a spinning axle, and if that wire comes into contact with it, it will destroy it. And now for those engine mounts I mentioned. These break often. I would suggest getting these mounts if you're doing a transmission because you may very well find that this is broken. Now I'm going to remove just about all the fasteners that hold the transmission to the engine. Save the two at the top to make for easy removal. This one down here, this is not easy to remove. Well, I mean, as far as to get to it. In fact, I think I might just leave that bolt hanging right there. That way I know where it goes and I know where to find it. Same with that one. That just leaves these two at the top of the bell housing. Now I gotta play musical engine transmission. Now I'll take this strap and move it from the transmission to the underside of the intake. You know, come to think of it, I think just removing these two 10 millimeters and getting this purge control off of here, it's gonna save me the possible headache of breaking it. Now to take out the last two fasteners and hopefully the transmission will stay, engine go away. Okay, there's one more fastener up under here that I missed. So there's one more 17 up above underneath this engine mount. All right, now the fasteners should be out. There it is. Yay! We got what we came for. Gonna set the engine here while I go and get the new transmission. I should mention that when you're doing this, make sure those dowels come with your engine, and if they don't, remove them from the transmission and transfer them to the engine because they will not come with the new part. Without these, alignment of everything will be off, parts can break, so you don't want that. No. This is the new transmission, and in my view, it is a thing of beauty. It comes with everything, and I mean everything, including that, I'm gonna call it a power takeoff that comes off the back, transmission fluid, a new transmission cooler. This came from Go Powertrain, and I'm impressed. It gave me a little pack of washers and O-rings. That's unfortunate. Well, I can collect them in a minute. Now for the cool trick. Back at my days at Acura, I was putting in 2, sometimes 3 of these transmissions a day in Acura TLs, to be fair. Not as many MDXs, but they did go bad from time to time. Anyway, I developed a method for lifting these transmissions. I was doing it so much. I'm using this. And if you wonder what this is, if you have a Pilot or MDX that does not have a trailer hitch, it does not have a trailer hitch. If it has a trailer hitch, you won't see this, but these are bolted here, up under the body of both the MDX and the Honda Pilot. But again, if there is a trailer hitch, this won't be here. Hence the reason I have this. Installing trailer hitches at the dealer, I had a few of these left over, and these are perfect for this job. Get yourself a bolt and a couple of washers, and you can take this and that same hook that I used to lift the engine and transmission, you can use for this. You don't need to tighten it all the way down, you just need to make sure it doesn't come off. Now, I can easily remove the transmission without having to break my back doing it. You're welcome. Now I'm going to try to rest the transmission on this tire, but I'm going to try to do it in such a way to where the front of it is pointing upward to make it easy to attach to the engine, or easier, I should say. Honestly, that's a bit extreme. Hopefully that block of wood will help. Exactly what I needed. Before I mate the engine to the transmission, which is kind of what I intend to do next, I want to replace the rear main seal. But I got to lift the back of the engine up a little bit more to get that flex plate off of there. Hopefully leaving a little bit on the tire helps to keep it from moving around too much. Now to get the flex plate off. Those are 17 millimeter 12 point. Doesn't look bad in there. Now, some people talk about oil leaks. There's an O-ring underneath this area up here that could possibly leak. There might be a little bit there, but actually there's a drain hole here too. So anything that's in the lifter valley will drain right onto here. I'm gonna leave it alone. I'm saying this is just trash from what was in the intake. I am gonna replace that rear main seal though. First, let's clean things up a little bit. Everything else that seals this is just Honda Bond or RTV. Come to think of it, this is also a good time to remove the thermostat and clean the housing. Just because I'm here, I have the air. This is actually a seal remover, so it's not the proper tool for this, but we are replacing it. That is an original equipment thermostat. I like original equipment thermostats for Hondas, so if you are going to replace one, strongly recommend it. I will show you the part number when I get to that installation, but for right now, I just want to clean inside of here because I can easily access it. And I'm going to do that with a roll-lock disc and an angle die grinder. That looks much better. This tool that I used to remove the thermostat is actually for removing seals, such as this one. Now, recent experience has taught me, and I'm not too worried because this doesn't look like this has ever been replaced. But recently I replaced a rear main seal, and this surface inside here was damaged, and I installed the new seal, but it still leaked, and it was leaking from the outside. This surface on the outside was leaking because this on the outside of the seal was damaged. Look for any damage before you install the seal. I dealt with it by sanding it down a little bit and then putting a little bit of RTV in the damaged area and then installing the seal. Hasn't leaked since. This is the part number for the new rear main seal. What I would normally do with these is I'd come in and I'd add a little bit of lubricant on the inside because I don't want to install the seal dry. But Honda's already done that for me, so I can just install it. However, I will take a little bit of silicone spray, spray it around the outside to make installation a little bit easier. The spray dries up, unlike the paste. Makes it perfect for stuff like this. Take the big end of a socket extension like this and just lightly tap it in. That looks really good. Sometimes I'll just feel with my finger just to see if it's sitting evenly and flush, and I can feel that it's out a little bit. Perfect. And now to reinstall the flex plate, it has to go on this way. If you look at it this way, you can see where the crankshaft was and also where the torque converter touched it. But if you install it this way, well, if you can get it installed, bad things will happen. I don't think these holes are offset. I think everything just lines up. I'm going to add just a little bit of blue Loctite to the threads of the bolts. For the sake of time, I'm going to run these down with my impact. I believe the torque is 80 foot-pounds, and then you want to tighten it a crisscross pattern like you're putting a wheel on. So one more thing I'd like to do before we proceed, and that is to clean up this dowel. You might remember there was some difficulty getting the engine and transmission apart, partly because of the corrosion that's here. So I'm just going to clean a little bit of this corrosion off before I try to install it into the new transmission, and hopefully that will help things go together better. I'm just going to use a piece of crocus cloth for this. You could use like a piece of sandpaper, whatever abrasive that you can find. The dowel on this side doesn't look bad, so I'm going to leave it alone. I think I take my transport hook, let's call it a transport hook, off. Probably need to get this out of the way. Let's save this to be transferred over to the old transmission so that I can install it before I send it back. Well, do what you can to take care of your core when you send it back so that they have something rebuildable. Let's see if we can't get these two lovebirds together. This engine load leveler, probably one of my favorite purchases this year. Got one of the dowels started. I just take a little bit of, this is engine oil, and I put it on the bolts before I install them. I've just always done that. Not saying you have to, it's just something I've done. And all three of these top bolts are the same. And once you get some bolts started, you're pretty much home free. Messed up my knee painting yesterday. Kind of hurts to kneel down on a rock. Now all we have to do is run them down. I installed these three fasteners, so that one, and that one down there. And then you can see that that dowel was pivotal in getting this to lock together. And because you can see the top is farther out, I'll start tightening at the top and then work my way down. And I can see that it's drawing up, and I'm going to let it do precisely that. So in other words, I won't run any one fastener all the way down. I'll sort of walk it together. No popping noises or binding. That's a good sign. Yay! The new transmission's made it up. So now I'm going to take this strap that's up here and move it down to here where it was before, so I've got a nice even load. When I let this down, the engine's going to come down further, so I'm going to put the tire under the front to make that not happen. Better idea, maybe? Tires are squishy and they move, so it's not really predictable. This wood block's flat surface. Bottom of the oil pan is a flat surface. I'm banking on the two playing nice, at least long enough for me to do what I gotta do. Yeah, it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. Load leveler for the win. I can tie that up a little more evenly. That's a little more even. Start with this power steering rack. Where are you, bracket? I found it. I had also sandblasted and painted it earlier this morning, along with some other parts that need to get switched over. I think this guy goes on like this, because it's what this bolts into. Kind of a crazy design. if you ask me. So there's one that's got to go through here that wasn't there before. I grabbed another bolt so that I could replace it. To say that's a difficult fastener to get to is like the understatement of the year. Why does this keep moving around? Lock the wheels down so that it doesn't, dummy. It's the whole reason you spent all that money on those casters. And you might remember this bracket goes over here, and I hope you saw that I put on that little rubber collar before I put the rack in there, because you need it. There's obviously an arrow that this is supposed to go that way. I know, the bolts are still gross, but that's the way the cookie's gonna crumble. Anti-seize on this one. Now you might remember I loosened this up for this very reason, so I could get this into the position that I want. Yeah, just drip all over my freshly painted subframe, you stupid power steering hose. Just go right ahead. The power steering rack's installed. One thing you want to make sure of is those boots move like that on both sides, because the tie rod end has got to rotate within them. That's the next step. Stabilizer bar, we don't want to forget that thing. This is the part number for the stabilizer bushings for the inside. I did get new ones. I knew you'd never forgive me otherwise. Also, with the difficulty that it would take to get to these, it's definitely a worthy investment, I think. Before installing these, I like to take a bit of silicone paste. In fact, there's a stickier version of silicone paste that they often use for this. So if you get a kit from, like, say, Energy Suspension with some poly bushings, which I believe these are poly bushings, by the way, they come with a stickier form of silicone. But the idea is to get some form of lubricant in here so that that doesn't make noise, because that's ultimately what you may end up with if you don't do this. I don't believe these are directional at all. With these, I had one break off, if you remember, and I had to, mess with the welding and everything to get it to undo itself. I'm gonna put a little bit of Loctite on these threads. That helps prevent that. I know it seems counterintuitive, but there's huge gaps between threads when you fasten something together. That Loctite fills up those gaps and prevents, like, moisture and other gunk from getting in here and causing corrosion. So that's the reason why I'm doing it. You think I'm locking it down, but really, I'm making it so that it doesn't corrode. So on each of these, again, a little bit of blue Loctite. That's what we want. No noise. Anchor Industries sent me a care package of all the engine mounts for this 2003 Honda Pilot, and these are all the part numbers. Now that part number is the correct part number for this mount. Again, I'm going to add a little blue Loctite to the threads of the fasteners, because with it pointed up like this, moisture and things can get in here and wick down in. And if I do this, the idea is that it helps seal things off, keeps the moisture out, keeps the corrosion out. This little rubber piece is on the old mount. It's like a vibration damper, is what a lot of these are for. So any vibrations that might go through the chassis, these things help eliminate them. Lose these and you could have weird vibrations. That's the part number for this front mount. These are liquid-filled engine mounts. So if they look like my old one and they are all covered with oil, probably means they're bad. And if you've got like a vibration at idle or a clunk when you shift from forward to reverse, this could be the issue. I believe it only goes on here one way. And this one has a vacuum port in the bottom. Now, I didn't see a vacuum port on the vehicle, but I'm gonna look for it because sometimes these are vacuum controlled. Looking at the old engine mount, there's no vacuum port like there is on the new one. You can see that right there. I'm not concerned about that. I'm just gonna roll with it and put it together. This is an early Pilot, probably before they installed active engine mounts on these. I don't think it's gonna be an issue. Again, a little blue Loctite on the fasteners. A Here's another one of those dampers, something that I painted when I had it off the vehicle. A couple of things that we need to install before putting it back in the cradle. This front mount bracket being one of them. There are things on the old transmission that we're gonna need for the new one that I was not expecting. One of those things is the Prindle switch, or park reverse neutral drive is kind of a term for it anyway. It's located underneath this cover, underneath these two 10 millimeters. Harness is also fastened up here. It's also clipped on back here. Additionally, there is a temperature sensor, which they provided us with a new one, which I'll switch over, but I need to remove it because there's another small harness, this one here, that also needs to get swapped over. Additionally, these pipes that come off the top here, those are going to need to be swapped over. You may notice that this is all nice and shiny and painted. That's because I did just that. I sandblasted and painted this. This bracket used to go up over the top of this. Additionally, there's another bracket back here that I did the same treatment to as well. Those things will need to get swapped over. This bracket came off with these two 12 millimeters on top of this assembly. It looks like this is a 10 millimeter here. These banjo bolts hold this hose assembly on. I'll clean this stuff before installing it on the new transmission. But anyway, that's what I'm after now. I have to clean that guy up before I install it. And this is the switch. It's also connected to what's referred to as the manual valve. And that's what you move when you move your gift selector lever. So as you move the gift selector, the gear selector, this will move this switch and tell the transmission what gear it's in. Some of these are adjustable and you have to make sure that you adjust them when it's in park. And yeah, it is adjustable. See how these are slotted? So this can move around. I am going to use the new temperature sensor. So here's the old one. I need this harness too. These are 17s. I have new crush washers. This is the new temperature sensor that came with the transmission. It goes in right down there. And I'm going to save these plugs and install them in the old transmission before I package it up, send it away as a core, just because I'm that guy, I guess. I'm just going to take a little dab of automatic transmission fluid, since that's what this is, to lubricate the O-ring before I start it. All right, I kind of got to do this from the top down a little bit. I've got new sealing washers on here. So there's another sensor that I need to swap over. This, I believe, is a speed sensor. I put a new O-ring on the sensor before installing it in the new transmission. These O-rings came with the transmission. You might remember I dropped some of them down inside the case. Let's get our Prindle switch back on. I'm not going to tighten these down all the way, and I'm not going to put the outer cover on. The reason for that is so that when I get it back together, I can make the adjustments. See what I mean? You can adjust it. So it's got a little bit of movement there. Looks as though this piece of plastic is taking the place of this piece of metal. I don't need to put this piece of metal back on here. No fastener there. No tightening this fastener yet, but I will plug it in. Let's get the transmission mounts. That's the number for the front one. Looks like that. And now the back one, that's the part number for the back one. It's got these two funky looking 14s. I dare say we're ready to put this in the cradle. By the way, I've locked the front wheels down also now. about nailed this front one. Before you get too happy, make sure these are going into their respective locations like that. Otherwise, you'll have to lift it back up. There we go. A little bit of the magic hammer put it in place. And that was that engine mount that I just showed you that was hanging up. The long weighted bolt that goes through the back mount. That one's in. Those both look good. Front looks good. I'm gonna check something real quick before I undo that. Yeah, that's what I thought. It shifted over this way a little too much, so I gotta pick it up, move it this way a little bit. Yeah, we're still good back here. Oh yeah, I like that better. Now I get my seat belts back. Everybody's all settled in nicely. Now to make it mobile again. I love this cart. I love it. I can take the old guy and put him in his box. Oh yeah. Leak everything out. Leak it all out. Whatever you forgot, leak it out now. I might just let that sit and do its thing over the top of some oil dry. Good day to you, Mr. Leaky, busted transmission. Don't close it up yet. Wait until you've got your new transmission installed and everything is working before you do button this up. Otherwise, you may find yourself looking for a bolt component, something special that you left on this thing. As I said, it's a good idea. Get your stuff squared away with a new transmission before you finally package this up and send it off. I hope you found that entertaining and educational, as I promised at the beginning of the video. And if you made it this far, well, thank you. I really appreciate that. Now, rest assured, I'll be dealing with those bad ground cables and some of those other issues and things that I sort of hit along the way. In fact, there's a complete engine servicing that goes on before that goes back into the Pilot. So we've got a little bit more work to do, despite the fact that I've done so much already. It literally took weeks to get to this point. And I hope you're enjoying the videos in this series, especially if you have a Honda Pilot. I hope it gives you some insight into what's under the hood there. Anyway, I will put links in the description to additional information, tools, all that kind of stuff. So if you have questions, check the description. If you have automotive questions, I ask you head to EricTheCarGuy.com. Yes, that will also be linked in the description. Thank you very much for watching today. Be safe, have fun, stay dirty. Remember, I post videos on Fridays, so stop back and see me then. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you next time.